Today I'll be continuing with my college football game by game prediction and roster discussion videos. Today I'll be doing the Texas Longhorns. Steve Sarkisian had the number one ranked recruiting class in 2025 in the country. And Texas, though, only returns 45% of their production, which is only 103rd nationally. So, starting on the offensive side of the roster, Texas averaged at 31.4 points per game last season. And while that's still good, it wasn't as good as I thought they would be. And having Arch Manning at quarterback instead of Quinn Ewers, who was a complete statue. Arch Manning it can run around. I think it could make that average number go up this year. Arch Manning took over in the UTSA game for Quinn Ewers after he got hurt, and in that game he threw for 223 and four touchdowns and completed 9 of 12 throws, and he also had three runs for 53 yards and a touchdown. And then he started the next two games against Louisiana Monroe and Mississippi State. Against Louisiana Monroe, he was 15 of 29 for 258 yards and two touchdowns. And he did throw two interceptions, and he didn't run in that game. But then against Mississippi State, he was at 26 of 31 for 325 yards and threw two touchdown passes, and he ran six times for 33 yards and a touchdown. I think he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the country. And besides that, last year he did play a little, even when Quinn Ewers was healthy, to run some. And at wide receiver, Texas does lose their best one, Matthew Golden, who went first round in the NFL draft. But they do have Ryan Wingo, a five-star wide receiver who didn't have a very big freshman season last year. He played and started all 16 games and only had 29 catches for 472 and two touchdowns. He did average 16.3 a catch, though I'd expect him to have a much bigger year this year. And they've got DeAndre Moore coming back, a four-star wide receiver who played in all 16 games and started nine games last season. And he had 39 catches for 456 and seven touchdowns, averaging 11.7 a catch. He had a huge game in the SEC championship against Georgia with nine catches for 114 and a touchdown. I think he'll have a bigger year this year. And they bring in a really good wide receiver from Stanford, Emmett Mosley. He played in nine games and started eight games as a freshman last year, and he had 48 catches for 525 and six touchdowns, averaging 10.9 a catch. He might be Texas's best wide receiver this year. And at tight end, they do lose Gunnar Helm, but they do bring in a really good tight end from California who I think might be an upgrade over Gunnar Helm. His name is Jack Andrews. He had last year 56 catches for 623 and two touchdowns, averaging 11.1 a catch. I think they'll be good at wide receiver and tight end. And the running back room is in very good shape. They've got Wisner coming back, who had 1,064 yards and 5 touchdowns on 226 carries last year, averaging 4.7 a carry. He played in 15 games and started at 12 games. And they've got CJ Baxter coming back, a five-star running back that missed all of last year with a injury during a fall practice. But in 2023, he played in 12 games and started 6 games and had 659 and 5 touchdowns on 138 carries, averaging 4.8 a carry. And they've got Jarrett Gibson, who is a four-star running back who only got 78 carries as a freshman last year, and he had 377 and 4 touchdowns, averaging 4.8 a carry. He did play in 12 games, though, and I expect him to get more carries this season. And on the offensive line, I think Texas is going to take a step back here because they lose four offensive linemen who are now in the NFL. They lose Kelvin Banks and Cameron Williams and Jake Majors and Hayden Connor. Kelvin Banks got drafted in the first round. And the only starter they've got coming back is right guard DJ Campbell, who is really good. He allowed only 3 sacks and 15 total quarterback pressures last season. And they do have two other offensive linemen with starting experience, and they have recruited really well on the offensive line. So I still expect them to be solid there. And defensively, they were the second best in the country last year. They gave up on average only 12.8 points per game. And I don't expect their defense to be quite that good this year, but I still think it's going to be one of the best in the country. So on the defensive line, they do lose Alfred Collins, who is off to the NFL. He was a great player for them. But they've got Colin Simmons coming back, who had a great freshman season. He was a five-star recruit. I think he'll be an All-American player this year. Last year, he had 48 tackles and 46 total quarterback pressures, and he had 9 sacks and 3 forced fumbles and 2 pass breakups and an interception. And they've got Trey Moore, who had last year 35 tackles and 5.5 sacks and 26 total pressures and 2 forced fumbles and a pass breakup. And they've got Ethan Burke. He didn't start any games last year, but he played in all 16 games and had 27 tackles and 2 sacks and a pick six and 4 pass breakups. Their defensive line should be really good again. And at linebacker, Anthony Hill is an elite player. He had last year 113 tackles and 8 sacks and 23 total pressures and 4 forced fumbles and an interception and a pass breakup. And they've got Lyona LaFay coming back, who played in all 16 games and started 10 games last season and had 63 tackles and 2 sacks. And he also had 2 pass breakups and a forced fumble and an interception. And they bring in a transfer linebacker from Arkansas, Brad Spence. He had last year 54 tackles and 5 sacks and 12 total quarterback pressures and a pass breakup in 12 games. But he only started 4 games last year. And then in the secondary, they should be really good again. And at cornerback, they do lose Jahdae Barron, who went first round, and there's no real replacement for him. But they've got Malik Muhammad coming back, who's a really good player. he had last year 36 tackles and eight pass breakups. And they've also got Jalen Gilboa coming back, who had last year 58 tackles and three pass breakups and a sack. And at safety, they're going to be really good. Michael Taffay comes back, who I think it might be an All-American safety this year. That he had last year 78 tackles and 10 pass breakups and two interceptions and two sacks and a forced fumble. And they've got Jelani McDonald, who was a four-star recruit that played in 14 games and started four games last season and had 33 tackles and an interception and a pass breakup. And they've also got four-star Derek Williams, coming back from an injury in 2024 that caused him to miss most of the season. But in 2023, he didn't make any starts, but he played in 13 games and had 42 tackles and two pass breakups. Now for the game by game predictions. It's starting with on the road at Ohio State. So if you watched my Ohio State prediction video, you know I think Texas goes on the road and gets this win because Arch Manning I think is going to be a little more ready for a game like this than Julian Sayin will be. And while Ryan Day I think is a better coach than Steve Sarkisian is as a head coach. I don't really like the hire that Ryan Day made it defensive coordinator, and his new offensive coordinator. While he was probably the best wide receivers coach in the country, he hasn't ever called plays before, so that could be a weakness for Ohio State in this game. And I do think this is going to be a lower scoring, close game. Uh, but I think that Texas's defensive line is in better shape than Ohio State's is by a lot, even though the offensive line for Ohio State, I think, is a little more secure than Texas's is. So these next three games of San Jose State and UTEP and Sam Houston, which will all be big blowout wins for Texas. Uh, Texas should be able to win all three of these games by however much they want, and their second string should be playing in the whole second half of all three of these games. And now on the road at Florida, I think Texas wins this one pretty easily. Texas is so much better of a coached team than Florida is. And while Florida's quarterback Lagway has about as high of a ceiling as Texas's Arch Manning does, Lagway will not have near the talent at wide receiver to throw to that Manning will have. And I think Florida is going to struggle to stop Texas his offense in this game. I think Florida is going to struggle to score in this game. And now Oklahoma in the Red River rivalry game. So if you watch my Oklahoma prediction video, you know I think Texas does get the win in a much closer game than last year. I think it'll be a one score game that probably goes down to the last play, maybe like a 27 to 20 type of game. But I'm picking Texas because I do like their offense more than I do Oklahoma's. And on the road at Kentucky, Texas won this game 31 to 14 last year, and I expect them to win by a similar amount this year. Texas's defense will, I think, shut down Kentucky's offense in this game, and Kentucky's defense may still be good enough to keep Texas from running the score way up in this game, but I still think Texas is going to score quite a bit of points in this one. And then on the road at Mississippi State. Like I said in the Georgia prediction video with Mississippi State, the same thing goes with Texas. Texas is on a different universe than Mississippi State right now when it comes to talent and coaching, and this should be a blowout win for Texas. And now Vanderbilt. I think Texas will beat Vanderbilt easily. Vanderbilt's quarterback, Diego Pavia, may be a fun quarterback to watch this year. And having looked at Vanderbilt's roster, I do like their linebackers and their tight end. But other than that, they're going to be pretty bad. And Texas is so far ahead of Vanderbilt when it comes to talent and coaching. And the line of scrimmage is a huge thing in football, and Texas's linemen are so much better than Vanderbilt's are. And now on the road at Georgia, the biggest game of the season in the SEC, most likely. Some good news for Texas in this one is Michael Williams and Jalen Walker are no longer with Georgia. Both of them gave Texas a nightmare both times they played last year. So with them going and with Texas having a good running quarterback, Arch Manning, instead of the statue Quinn Ewers, if Texas's offensive line can be close to as good as it was last year, they might be able to score easier on Georgia this time. But Georgia, even though they lose the same amount of offensive linemen as Texas does. I would trust Kirby Smart more than Steve Sarkisian to rebuild their offensive line. And while I do think Arch Manning is going to have a better year at quarterback than Gunnar Stockton, you've got to remember that Gunnar Stockton led Georgia to a comeback win over Texas last season. And with play calling in this game, offensively, Texas is in better shape because Steve Sarkisian is the offensive coordinator and he's one of the best in the country at that. And Georgia's offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo, while he's a pretty good offensive mind, he did make a lot of strange play calls last year. And on the defensive side, Texas's defensive coordinator, Pete Winowski, is an amazing coordinator. He's turned Texas's defense from what was a bad defense into an elite defense. But Georgia's defensive coordinator, Glenn Schumann, is also a top five defensive coordinator in the country, I think. And with the head coach, Kirby Smart, I like better than Steve Sarkisian because not only did he beat Sarkisian twice last year, Kirby Smart has won so many more of these big games than Sarkisian has. That and with the game being at Georgia, I've got to go with Georgia to get this win in a close game. And now Arkansas. I think that Texas will win this game fairly easily. Texas has is a much better coach team than Arkansas is, and they've got a much better defense. And while Arkansas's quarterback Taylon Green had a similar year to what I think Arch Manning is going to have at Texas this season, he doesn't have the playmakers around him that Arch Manning is going to have at Texas. And now Texas A&M, a rivalry game. So this game has been moved to the Friday after Thanksgiving, and Texas A&M. I don't think is going to get shut out offensively by Texas like they did last season, but I still think they're going to struggle a lot to score on Texas, and I think this is going to be a defensive game again. And I think that Texas A&M is still way behind Texas as a football program, and I think that Texas is going to win this game by about 10 points again. So my final prediction for Texas is 11-1 overall and 7-1 in the conference. So this will for sure get them back to the college football playoff, and a good chance that this would get them back to the SEC championship. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll be back soon.